my audio, then I'm going to turn on your audio, and then I'm going to expose us.
That's a little better, right?
That is a little bit better. It looks a little bit more like you're a real gamer, Brandon.
I know, right? Not one of them fake gamer
Not a
boys.
fake gamer boy. Okay, and then I'm gonna actually go to our YouTube so that I can monitor what the chat looks like. And then I'm gonna have to mute the tab real fast.
It's a little better, right?
That is a little bit better. It looks a little bit. There we go. So now I can actually see the chat, maybe. Yep. Chat.
Excuse me.
So yeah, if you're watching me live on TikTok right now, you want to be watching us live on youtube.com/dying of exposure. This is Questboard Gaming. My name is Steve. I am joined by Brandon, and we are talking about all things TTRPG, indie games, Dungeons and Dragons, stuff like that. That's what we're talking about. How you feeling this beautiful Monday, Brandon, while I load up my hookah bowl?
All things considered, I'm doing all right. I am recovering from a bit of a sinus infection, so I apologize if I do cough a little bit during this.
How dare you? How dare you?
Today.
I just realized that I can't monitor the chat in YouTube, so that's your job, Brandon. There's no way for me to look at it with my current setup.
Right now. I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's nothing in it right now. But what we're talking about is just general TTRPG stuff and everything. I have some questions prepared for you. But for those that don't know, I do a actual play with Brandon on this YouTube channel, Dying of Exposure, called Through the Mill. We've been doing it for like 2.5 years. It's been a long campaign. We're in some good spaces right now. It's all friendly and everything like that. And Brandon and I have played some games together.
For Meatball, if you want to know about a lovable murder kitten.
Lovable murder kitten named Meatball. You can tune into that whenever it next happens.
We're gonna be on this Friday, right?
I think it's this Friday is the new day. But whenever it next happens. But Brandon, so we're just gonna, because I know you can talk about it for as long as I let you. Talk to me about martial classes, your feelings about martial classes, your emotions about them, and their comparative power or lack thereof in combat to caster main classes.
So I have a love-hate relationship with martial classes because of I love them in concept and in theme, and I actually quite like role-playing martial classes. I find that getting to play those kind of physically strong characters is actually an interesting headspace to get into. What ends up happening with most martial classes is they just have limited things that they end up actually doing in combat.
Yes. I mean, they can attack, and they can attack. They can swing. Yes. They can hit.
They almost always end up taking the attack action. It's numerically the best option you can take almost every time. You have a few other options, of course, things like trying to grapple or dodging, disengaging, stuff like that any other class can do. But you're not really
getting hit by the caster when they cast an AoE spell.
Because they cast an AoE spell.
You got that option. You got that option.
I definitely have that option. Have had that happen to me before. I even had it where I think this actually even happened to Barry, where someone cast like an entangle spell and it got none of the enemies and got Barry early on in the campaign.
Oh yeah.
And it's always also just like actually frustrated me from a perspective of like combat as storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Because combat, like any other portion of D&D, should be storytelling. That fighters and barbarians, unless you're choosing the battle master fighter, or if you're choosing a monk with their key points. And even then, we all know how the D&D community feels about monks right now. They're not exactly one of the top tier classes.
Nope. Even though Stunning Strike absolutely on its own is the OPest thing on the damn planet. But I agree.
Yes, but how you can
How many times
stun
can you do
one thing in a turn.
How many times can you Stunning Strike?
And then it costs you a key point. And then it costs you key points. And so how many times are you gonna and oftentimes, the DC for that isn't particularly high. So
nope, usually not.
Unless you're dumping a ton of ki and trying to stun something, you're not gonna get it. And so when you talk about like the disparity, there's a pretty significant disparity, especially once you start getting into late game. Like there's a bit of a bump early game, about 5th level, when fighters, barbarians, and monks get the extra attack turned on.
Yeah.
And they start getting to do a little bit more.
Yeah, like level 5 through 8 is pretty good for them.
Continue to get additional attacks.
They try with fighters. They try. And like you said, they gave you one subclass
and the
as a
fact
fighter.
That fighters get more feats
is a gift.
Fighters get additional feats, so they do all right. But ultimately, they need to have more options. And I know that part of like the hard part is that part of the charm of martial classes is that you don't have to pore over a spell book to figure out what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
And so like trying to bridge that gap of like giving marshals options without drowning them in choices that can cause issues with casters is like this balancing act that I think that frankly it needs to be struck though. I
mean, like rogues exist, right? And they've got like lots of little neat things that they can do depending on which subclass you're in. And like admittedly bards do have like a spell list, but they also have like bardics and shit, like they have other things that they tend to do in a lot of class features that just don't. Again, if you're like a battle master, right? If you're a battle master, that you've got a lot of like choices in how you use your attack action because you get a lot of bonus side stuff on the end there. But like I think that's a good at least first step in my mind of it's like
that's what
all right, you're martial, you're attacking, but yeah, continue.
So like with battle master abilities, I feel like they're like the ground floor, in my opinion, of what they need to actually be. And my very half-baked, very underdeveloped idea is effectively coming up with a system of slot-like abilities for martial classes that barbarians, fighters, and monks would get, and then you might throw in some individual of abilities in there that are only usable by monks, only usable by barbarians, only usable by fighters. That effectively replaces by doing this, we would axe the battle master class.
Yeah.
Because this would effectively replace that and give this to all martials.
So you want it at a major class level rather than a subclass level. Similar to how monks have key points regardless of what kind of monk you are.
Yeah. I want this to be like the martial class equivalent of spells.
Yeah.
Where casters all get spell casting, martials would all get a thing called exploits. And it would give them a variety of options of things to do. One of the first things I would do with exploits is take all of the battle master maneuvers, and they would all be level 1 exploits.
Yeah.
And then similar to how spells work, you get a number of exploit slots for level 1. You get like first level exploit slots, and I would only have it go to like level 4 or 5 rather than to level 9, because you don't want, like, part of the issue is you don't want to drown martials and options too much. You just want to give them enough that they can kind of build their character out for flavor. So yeah, that's my idea on it, is to just kind of give them some more options, give everyone more options, because of like, and let's be real, like getting to do an extra D8 points of damage 4 times a day is not huge.
No, that's not. Although
It's not
I think
huge.
monks get their key points back on short rest, but I might be wrong.
How many? I need to check really quick about how many uses of maneuvers Battle Master
And
get.
if they come back on a short rest or not, because that's a big key in 5e, right? Is
and that's one of the things that I would do is like these slots would either reduce the number of uses they get and let them come back on a short rest, or give them a lot of them
but
and let
long
them come
rest.
back on a long rest.
So I'm gonna evolve while you're looking that up. I'm gonna evolve a little bit further on the thing that you're doing because I like it. I want to take every class, and I know this is the opposite of what 1D&D seems to be doing, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I want to take every class and separate them further. So like there's the martial classes, right? Monk, fighter, barbarian. We know them, we love them. They hit really hard. You can kind of essentially call paladins into that class, but they do technically have spells, but almost all of them are burned for smites. So it's just more powerful martial class, and everything. But regardless, if we're talking just monks, fighters, and barbarians, I think that monks, having like a key point concept or something in this vein that you could further like expand upon or make like specific to monks that don't like burn slots or however or whatever exploit you want. I think monks are a great example of this, and I think that should be applied to fighters. And then I think you leave barbarians as the basic ones, and then you can kind of be like, listen, if you are genuinely like nervous about playing D&D, you're nervous about like all of the choices you have to make, and you do want to just play a character that hits something, I'm gonna give you this barbarian. Like, this is the class. This is the sorcerer of fighters, where it's just like you get this many spells, and then that's it. And that's that, or you get this much attack, and you get all the subclass stuffy and things like that to kind of mix it up. But it's essentially, it's like this is the simple version of a martial class, and then fighter and monk are very different versions of martial classes that have their different like kind of layers of exploit across their subclasses, and then they have their subclasses. And I think that would give, that would open up a lot of options for people without. And give people entry levels at different layers to like how complicated do I want my
I see what
fighter to
at,
be.
and I don't disagree. Though I think that there is a way. I don't think you necessarily has to be an on or off switch. I think what you could do with barbarians is give them a substantially reduced number of options.
Yeah, and that could also be true. Yeah.
I still think that the fact that barbarian becomes reckless attack always forever is
not exciting.
Something
it's
that,
not exciting.
Let's be real. If you're a new player and you're playing a character from level 1, right?
Yeah.
Your first time playing, and you get far enough that you get to the point where you're playing level 5,
you need shit. You need some.
You've already
honestly,
played enough to be experienced.
Honestly, that might be your answer right there. Is with barbarians, you just delay it a little bit more. And you're just like, barbarians let you have more warm-up time into the class. And then that way, if someone really does want to play a barbarian and everything, but they like a little bit more complexity, they have that opportunity when a campaign starts at like level 5, right? Which happens a lot.
A cool way to do it is that rather than, because I've always liked barbarians, but I've always felt like one of the things barbarians need is like a resource that they earn in combat rather than a resource that they start with.
Ooh, that's good. Like something that like a limit meter that fills up kind of concept, so or like units of challenge tokens or whatever.
And get hit, you get a point, and then you can spend those points on using your.
I like that. I like that because it encourages this play that's natural for a barbarian, which is rage and get in there, and then it's like, and then maybe not the first round you can't really do much, But by the second round, maybe you've got some low-level options, and then if it's a bigger battle, then those exploits can be taken further. I like that because it rewards barbarians who've had to survive longer in the combat, which is something that they're also good at. So it feels jelly. I like that idea. I like that a lot. I think that's a good instinct. And nothing in D&D, and as far as I know, Pathfinder really does you get hit and earn points. Like there's things like that based off dice rolls in other games. There's challenge tokens and shit like that.
Yeah.
But like, there's not something that's like, here's a mechanic of your class in a more rules-heavy game, like Wizards or like Paizo would put out. That it's like you just take it on the chin a lot, and that could be like something that you could then have a subclass that like leans really into that, and that would be exciting.
Yeah.
My brain is thinking pugilist, but I'm always thinking pugilist because I love brawler type classes because I'm in love with the idea of a drunk Irishman boxing in 1910. I just love it too much.
Yes, that's a good old classic image.
A bare knuckle boxer just like getting the ever-loving tar kicked out of them all day, bleeding from the face, and then still like, I'm still in this, just fucking
that's
jigging
one
it
of
off.
the things. Is like I wished barbarian and monk worked better together as a multi-class.
Yeah, because they'd be perfect, right?
But the fact that you have to choose between their two different unarmored defenses,
oh yeah,
means you kind of have vestigial class features. It's interesting. I don't know too much about Pathfinder classes. I do like a lot of the concepts behind Pathfinder 2e, but I definitely need to do more research. And I also want to say that, I don't claim to have any of these ideas being original. I may have heard them somewhere from someone, but
who knows? We're not publishing them in a book to buy, so we're fine.
Yeah.
Speaking.
So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. Did you have more toward that homebrew before we move on to the next subject?
I was just remarking on what little I have read about the barbarian in Pathfinder 2e is that they actually, I believe they actually take penalties to their AC when raging for the bonuses that they get. So they actually get like easier to hit and take more, but basically they take more damage because they don't have like resilience or resistance to stuff while raging.
And that actually segues a little bit nicely because there's been an ongoing discussion on the TikTok tabletop space about like, is Dungeons and Dragons actually a good first tabletop game to play? Because it's oftentimes thought of as the entry or the gateway into TTRPGs.
Yeah.
It's the thing everyone plays, and for those reasons, like those reasons are inarguably good in the way that it's like the majority of people that play tabletops have experience with it. You're going to find a huge community that knows it and everything. So as far as accessibility and finding a game and other players that know about it, that's the answer. But as far as like when you sit down with Dungeons and Dragons the game, is this the first game, assuming all other things are equal and you have other game options on the table, is this the first game that should introduce most people to like a TTRPG experience? Thoughts?
I mean, the hard part is picking any other one. And I think you're right in that the difficult, like, if you can find a game to play of any kind and you're new to the scene and you want to get into the game, just get a game. Just find a game you can play.
Yeah, whatever everyone else is playing that you know and can get into the scene, or that you're interested in and you can find. You'll learn it.
Yeah,
I would learn it. But like, I do love that they're like, there's this misconception because of that, because of the availability rather than accessibility is the term I'm going to use, of Dungeons and Dragons. There's that misconception that it's that it's like, oh, well, this is sort of like middle of the road, pretty straightforward role play. And then when you kind of back it up a little bit and it's like, is it though? Because it does have a lot of contextual rules and
There's a lot. It's a crunchy
lot.
system.
It's less crunchy than Pathfinder, but that's
even still, Pathfinder has some things about its design, especially with second edition, that are more streamlined.
Yeah, that
For
are more
example,
streamlined. Yeah.
for example, Pathfinder doesn't have different types of actions in combat. There's no reactions. There's no move action.
It just sort of
no
has
bonus
points,
action.
right?
You just get 3 actions.
Yeah, you just get 3 things you can do.
You can do anything with those 3 actions that you can do. You don't have specific abilities relegated to regular actions or bonus actions. Or
that alone,
actions.
the combat alone, which is where D&D like lives and breathes, right? The combat alone is so like when you break it down is so many caveats of it's like, all right, so you have an action, a bonus action, a free action, and a movement action, and all of those are going to be different. And thank God that there's software that you can manage your character sheet with, because you'd have to write all this down in a way that you could read it or have note cards or flow charts.
And don't forget that like different portions of your character sheet reference other information from other portions of your character sheet. So you're effectively having referenced spreadsheets.
And then on top of that, you have your class features, your racial features that you've got to kind of keep track of and know that that are happening, and then those oftentimes, like bards for example, have a certain number of bardic inspirations, and that you've got to keep track of, and that's not like the same unit as a spell slot, which is its own thing, and some spells are in different categories of action, and then you can't cast 2 leveled spells on the same turn. There's so much thinking. Yeah, and it's to those that have played, that have history in this, because it becomes the game that most people play, so it's the game most people can find to play for the first time and that most people can easily teach. It's like this, but it's like learning English as your first language. It's not that English makes the most sense to learn as a first language. It's just the language that people speak around you and know how to teach you and work with you on. But there are languages that have more streamlined systems that you can intuit better because they follow rules, or that even have less characters to have to understand word sounds, less phonemes and stuff like that. And there are, admittedly, more complex languages that have things that are even more drastically complicated to learn. But there's a lot out there that do it. So I think it's very funny that, like, it's very reasonable. It's completely logical that most people start with Dungeons and Dragons, but it's also kind of hilarious that it's like, why would I start with an RT, or why would I start with a third-person action game like Devil May Cry when Mario Brothers is right there and I have to jump and move?
In a way, it actually creates this barrier of entry.
Oh yeah,
because you kind of have to be willing to jump through that. You have to jump that hurdle.
You have to jump in
complexity of D&D if you want to get into the TTRPG world.
And on top of that, you have to get used to. You really have to have a lot of trust in the table you're playing at. Like a lot of people play with friends, but with the advent of online stuff, like a lot of times you're playing with strangers, or if you go into a game store and go into like a game night, right? And you go and you play with strangers, you got to have that trust that it's like the table's going to be patient with you. And I think most human beings that aren't incredibly self-centered are gonna have that feeling like, oh, I feel bad that I have to ask these questions repeatedly and everything. And most tables of reasonable players are like, yeah, of course you do. It's complicated and it's a mess. And the best way to learn it is just by like playing it a few times, and then you get into the rhythm of it and everything like that, and you begin to understand it. But like a lot of people are like, well, you can listen to actual plays, and I love listening to them, but I'm like, I wouldn't argue that until like 30, 40 hours of actual play listening, which is a lot of time, I don't know what's going on.
I'll also be honest in that, as a bit of a rules lawyer myself, you know, unless you're finding like a really hard-lined like actual play that's dedicated to being representative of what actual play is like, most actual plays are not going to be what you are going to experience at the table.
Yeah, so that's going to give you a bunch of other misconceptions.
You may get bits and pieces of that, but you're not going to get the same
You're
experience.
watching a D&D actual play, usually you're gonna get, typically most of them, you're gonna get, okay, so in combat there's like an initiative order, and then I have like an attack action and like another action, and I can move every turn. You're gonna probably get that, but then depending on which actual play you're doing, there's actual plays that let people multicast leveled spells, and they're fine with it because they find it more exciting. Well, and then you're also gonna not understand how roleplay works, or how much and how elevated roleplay is in good consumable action play as opposed to normal people.
Watching a sport's being played and playing a sport.
Yeah, it's wholly different. And so yeah, I think it's very funny that it's like, but you're right, it is kind of the hurdle you have to earn, and it is sort of a barrier to people really playing the game, playing TTRPGs in general.
If that could be my biggest critique of the tabletop RPG community, and specifically the D&D community in general, is my biggest critique is the resistance to try other systems.
Yeah, and that's a common critique of the D&D space, is that. And understandably, imagine you spent your 2 years into playing, and you're probably assuming that you've played a couple times a month, so you've played probably like 30, 40 sessions. You still have tons of classes you haven't played, tons of things that you haven't done. Maybe you're getting into Magic now, and then someone's like, we should play another system. And your frame of reference is, I don't want to be bad at this for like 4 or 5 months to get good, because you're thinking other system equals D&D, not other system equals Quest, or other system equals paranoia, Power by the Apocalypse. Not that Cthulhu's easier than D&D, but like,
I want to try Cthulhu,
but like,
so bad.
And then you're also not taking into account, hey, you learned D&D, so you're now, much like learning multiple languages, you're getting better and better every time you learn a new one, at how quickly you can pick up yet another one, because you understand that there's like sort of bigger, higher level concepts.
And let me also offer this little tidbit to anyone out there who likes D&D. Learning another tabletop game will improve how you run D&D.
Yep, every time. If you're running games,
if you DM a game of D&D, or if you play in a game of D&D, when you learn how other systems work, you will see how D&D can be improved. How you play as a player, how you prepare as a DM. You'll find that you're like, oh, there's this system and this other game that works better than how it's done in D&D, but I can just snip that out and drop it in my game instead.
Exactly. And
it's kind of what you'll find with like the most long-running campaigns with people, or like the most veteran DMs out there, is that their game doesn't actually really resemble D&D anymore.
Straight up and down.
It's a Frankenstein's monster kind of scenario, but it's really a thing of beauty when you get into those kind of games.
My favorite thing is going and finding games that do like mechanical systems for roleplay. From a player's perspective, because it makes you realize it's like, oh, I could take this, and even without the system behind it, I could do this rhythm with another player at the table, and I could initiate a scene. And almost any DM, even if they haven't done a lot of DMing outside of that, is going to be like, thank you.
I believe, well, I haven't actually had a chance to play it. I believe Fate has some really strong role-play mechanics. And that's one of the things that people think, like, what is role-play mechanics? D&D actually doesn't have a whole lot of role-play mechanics.
Yeah, it has skill check mechanics, but that's not the same thing. And the moment you read role-play mechanics, you're like, oh, I see. I see. This is just a system in order to initiate and have back-and-forth roleplay, then has a mechanical benefit, detriment, meaning in the game as it progresses, whether that meaning is just in the story space, or oftentimes, in my favorite versions, in the story space and the character build. Because you did this thing, you now get this thing, which is mechanical growth in the skilly kind of dice rolly portion of it, or challenge overcoming portion of it, because you initiated the roleplay mechanic to get the character build experience. If you refresh,
I'll give it a okay. One of the things that is actually in the new playtest material that I think is a really good decision.
Yeah.
And I think it borrows from other. It's inspired by other games out there. Some of you may have noticed in the first playtest material they released, when you get a nat 20, you get inspiration. I immediately did not like this, because to me that was like a way of introducing cascading nat 20s. Just a person would get on a roll because of you get inspiration, and you spend an inspiration, you get another inspiration.
Yep.
With this most recent playtest, they released nat 1s instead give inspiration.
Which I think we can all agree.
That's a fantastic idea.
It's a superior idea.
Is that one, we've all been into a place where we've had a bad night of rolls.
Oh yeah.
We've all had a night where the dice went against us. And I like the idea of getting inspiration on nat 1s as a way of softening someone who's having a bad night, softening the blow.
Is it PBA that does the challenge tokens? Like when you fail, you get a thing that you point you can spend. Something does that.
I think it's I can't remember. I also think Fate has it where you only get experience when you fail at things.
Yeah, but it's a great method to be like, no, you want to fail, because any good game is filled with failures, because that's called challenges and growth. Like that's good storytelling.
Let's be real. If you look at the most interesting stories you've ever seen, your heroes fail until the end.
Yeah, they're literally
constantly barely making it through or failing.
Yeah, that's what you want. And so I do love that. So
yeah, like having those kind of things. I like the idea of nat 1s getting inspiration, because of it helps make getting that nat 1 not so brutal. And then suddenly someone's like, damn, well, at least now I have this in my pocket to pull me out of a tight spot the next time I'm in one.
Yeah, it's definitely something that like is a constant divide from forever DMs versus players, which is DMs are like I'm rolling so many die every session. It doesn't matter if I have a bad night or I have things. I'm rolling for all the enemy NPCs. I'm rolling for every normal social NPC interaction. I'm rolling constantly. I'm constantly rolling. So if I have a streak that goes bad, fine. That's fine. I can have 7 bad rolls in a row. It's fine. I have so many. And then regular players are like, listen, we had a combat and a social interaction, and I got to roll a total of 8 times this whole session, and 5 of those I failed, so it feels like I didn't get to do anything cool. And that's not why you play that's not why you play a game like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or Starfinder or something like that. Those are to overcome challenges, not absolutely get obliterated. You like that sometimes, but for the most part, you want to be like, I narrate what I do, and I roll, and I succeed at it, and it's super cool, and I'm a badass.
I do wish that D&D would do a better job of expressly communicating to DMs what failing forward looks like.
It's something. It's definitely something that could be in the DMs and players handbook. Just everybody should know what failing forward looks like.
And I think to me that's where some of the most exciting, thrilling moments of D&D come through.
That's a challenge I have. That's a challenge I think every DM struggles with.
I mean, we absolutely struggle with it, and that's one of the things that I think I like by I believe Powered by the Apocalypse has like success with you have failure, you have success with a complication, and then you have pure success.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's Powered by the
that is. It is. It's definitely. It's been in enough of the games I've consumed of them that should be core to the thresh it here in a bit. Like now, we might have a few of these because something's happening again with the internet.
Is that it actually puts that expressly into its system. It's like, you're going to do good, but you're going to have a problem. And I feel like that's what like most failures in a skill check should be.
It's that it's
D&D.
like you succeed, but more like there was an advice, and I still this is some of the best goddamn advice ever, which is and it's an advice that's very D&D centric or Pathfinder centric, which is the Nat 1, right, and everything. Yeah. And it used to be pretty common in the games that I played and everything. When you got a Nat 1, you'd have a critical fumble and something very bad would happen to you.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think I came to the group, and I don't do this myself anymore. But eventually I came to the realization that I agreed more with a Nat 1's just a Nat 1, and you just definitely fail, and that's it. But the simple fact, and this goes to the how do you like either failing into a different path of success or just failing in an interesting and meaningful way. Simply being like, because it's very common for DMs when someone critically succeeds for them to be like, what does this look like? How do you critically succeed? You're the badass in this moment. Do it on the failures too. Why did your characters thing not succeed here? What caused their failure? Because if they're a badass martial character that's like level 12 and they get that Nat 1, which is definite failure, they're definitely failing, even though they're very trained. Giving it to the player and being like, what do you think distracted or was on your character's mind or the enemy did to actually outmaneuver you in this situation? Same thing with spellcasting. Was it a disconnection from your god or source of magic if you're a warlock or a cleric, or did you falter in your oath as a paladin? Like, what thing? And it creates this great sense of like role play and making those things more meaningful, and then also opens the door, because every time the players say anything, it gives the GM an option to like focus on that and then run with it in a new and interesting direction. So it means that the players kind of get to further like put out little potential hooks for the DM to cooperate with them and be like, oh, your character's like this, and it adds so much. And I'm like, it's such a simple thing of, it's just like, do the thing that everyone does with crit successes with critical failures, and see how much fun that is.
That also ties into like what I think is really important for anyone who wants to DM, is that the best DMs want their players to succeed.
Oh yeah, every time.
They don't want their players to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And here's like a really small example of what I would kind of consider as a way of having people fail forward. Let's say you have an obstacle where your characters are in a dungeon above a bottomless pit and they're having to jump from pillar to pillar, right? Classic dungeon delver stuff.
Who really built simple. This bullshit wonderful dungeon shit?
Who built this shit? This doesn't make any coherent sense to exist in reality, but it feels like it's straight out of Indiana Jones, and I'm loving it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, right? Love it. Big energy.
So, your natural inclination is to think, oh, okay, you have to do an athletics check to jump this distance, right? Let's have you do an athletics check to jump it. The person rolls, and you have like a relatively easy DC, like a DC 12.
Yeah.
Let's say. Your marshals are most likely going to beat that, especially if they're like level 10 or above. But your casters may not. So what does that look like?
Yeah.
When they fail that? Well, rather than being like, oops, you fall and die, because that's obviously lame and no one wants to do that. How do you make that moment good? And that failing moment interesting?
Yeah. And
and here's the other thing, is that DMs are still, I think DMs really struggle with the idea of like, when your characters roll in that one, you should introduce a complication that makes their life harder. Because you should. Because that's how the game gets more interesting. So like an example, you could be like, oh, you as you jump and you land on the other side, you teeter on the edge and your bag rustles and out pops your healing potions and they plummet into the abyss.
Yeah, that's a kind way of doing like a Nat 1 surprise that doesn't ruin the character permanently, but is a complication for later because you have less healing potions. Or very commonly, I do this as a DM all the time. If the narrative isn't going in the successful path that I want for the characters, because of course I want the characters to get through the dungeon so they can fight the thing that I put at the bottom of the dungeon to fight, so that when they kill the thing, the dungeon starts collapsing, because of course it was a load-bearing boss.
Good old load-bearing bosses.
Yeah, good old classic JRPG load-bearing bosses. What you want, what I think most people would want, and a lot of DMs do, is they're like, okay, they're falling, and then it's kind of almost become habit of a lot of players to being like, can I do something? Can I react and do something to try and catch them? And I love that synergy. That just has to be very deeply established from the DM. Like, this person failed. All right, who's got a reaction? Who could possibly go back? Oh, the barbarian's good at athletics, so do a dex or an athletics check or something, right? Or an acrobatics to try and grab them and swing them up. Right? Give another player the hero moment. But the problem with that is that you're still making the moment not great or interesting for the person that failed. They just failed. That's all that happened there.
When you do that, you remove the stakes.
You remove the stakes.
And this rolls back to like one of the earliest philosophies about when rolling dice. When you're doing skill checks, and this is one you'll hear all over the place. Once again, no original ideas, but is you should only call on a skill check when the possibility of failure has like meaningful, interesting outcomes.
I generally agree.
If the outcome of a failure is that you just keep trying until you succeed, then why bother and then just have them succeed?
Yeah, I like. It's one of the things that is a struggle and that I'm kind of trying to work for. And this is why I love talking tabletop and love consuming tabletop stuff, is because it makes you introspective about your own stuff, and then maybe 10% of what you think about actually like seeps into the game. Right? The games that you run. It's one of the things I think is interesting. So I used to be really against everyone in the party roll for something. And now I think I like the idea of having everyone in the party roll something if you set the DC in such a way. And again, this is good for like this is good for a lot of like thinking or like processing things, not as much for like, we break down the door. Well, we have 6 seconds per round. Someone's going to break that door down, right? And everything like that. But like everyone is in the party is going to roll it. The DC is going to be here. That means some people are more likely to get it. Some people are less likely to get it. But I, as a DM, am already thinking, what happens if which one of my players succeeds at this thing? Right? Because I want them to succeed at it. I've not made this impossible. I don't try to do checks that are impossible. If it's an impossible task that's asked for from the party, then it's going to have a consequence for them trying it, and it's going to do something or be something, but like it won't be like necessarily the goal they set forth, and that needs to be made clear. But okay, all 5 of you roll a history check, and then I, as the player, am like, am I confident, or as the GM, am I confident that if someone who shouldn't probably get this history has it, that I have runway in their backstory to be this? Or do I simply say, these 3 players roll a history check, you 2 don't have experience with it? You could, like, based off your character, based off the playing we've done, it doesn't make sense for your character to do it. And if you're mixing it up, if you're doing things where you just give party members the, like, you're capable, eventually you'll push down the door, or everybody can roll it and somebody can get it, or some of the people can roll it because other people wouldn't know or they're not there. If you're constantly mixing it up, you're keeping it fair. You're keeping it on even ground.
A good tactic too, because of one of the most important things as a DM is being able to make sure you shift the spotlight.
Yeah.
Let someone have their time in the spotlight, then shift it to another person and let them have their time in the spotlight. It also means like balancing out your pillars of play, making sure you're doing good exploration, good combat.
It's good.
Play.
It's good to try and be verbose too about when somebody like joins something. Like recently, obviously, you two. I wasn't very good at it in the moment, but you and Celine, another player in our game, were trying to deal with like repairing a piece of the ship. And Celine's been very focused with their character being about the mechanics and functionality of the ship. It's very important to them as a player. And so they kind of run that. But then you, being you, have like a great instinct for it's like, what in my kit can I apply to this and sort of like bend it in this way and everything like that. And what I should have done in that moment is just like, cool, this is no longer a DC check. That I think you're going to fail. We're going to see how fastly you succeeded it, because now you're both working together to solve this problem.
Oh, you're talking about when I was using mending to help.
You were using mending like a welder, and then Celine was using the knowledge of the ship to be like here, and here, and you're doing that. And I had this whole other thing that I was distracted with because I'm spinning plates, trying to figure out exactly how that's all going to play out. But like.
And you played my story against me.
I played it against you because I played it against other players.
That's what you're supposed to do.
You give a DM a little thing.
I gave you.
Well, it also goody
things.
It also means that I fully expect that trick is, unless I wait a few months, is not going to work again. But it was a great.
Well, here's the other thing, though. Here's the other way you can play it. One. It doesn't have to manifest the same way twice.
Of course.
There could be a variety of ways in which it manifests. And two, you have an entire ship full of NPCs.
And that's the other thing, is that the NPCs in that ship can absolutely do that. And that's, you've succeeded for the most part so far, although one didn't. But you've succeeded most part so far. I'm literally having your characters just roll a d10 to find out if somebody's in danger that's an NPC, just because I like the randomization of, it's like, which little character can I make go bad now?
I like how you're like, you guys can discreetly travel through this realm, but do you want to save Meatball?
Do you want to save Meatball?
Do you want to save Meatball? Do you want to save the
it also gave me
squat-faced tabaxi?
It also gave me the out as a narrative, which is why these NPCs aren't even close to DMPCs. They don't have stats. They have names and character traits. But like, it gives me NPCs as the DM.
Except for Grimmothy's now a paladin.
Now a paladin. But I don't have anything for them. And the reasoning being is because I'm like, the purpose of them is to make a bunch of NPCs that your characters like, that I can do cheap shots with and make your characters panic and not do it to the players to devalue. Made you name them, made you describe them, then made you roll to see which one would be your little buddy, and everything like that. Just
love it.
It's a good system.
Oh man, don't think I didn't realize it while you were doing it.
I was like because taking cheap shots at your players, like, you can occasionally get away with it if you kind of earn the cheap shot, so it's only like half and half. It's like a little narratively railroady, but it's like we all accept that sometimes we just need those dramatic moments. But like, putting lives in danger is something that the mechanics and choices of the player should earn, not the DM just being like, I've made this impossible thing for you because I'm God, and everything. But these crew members are inevitably less powerful than all of you. They are there to be put in danger, and they create a lot of opportunities for me to make you have to make moral choices that you as a party of very powerful characters would have to do. But going all the way back to rolling and role play statting and everything like that, even in something that's so system-y based with skill checks and spells and actions and initiative orders and stuff like that with D&D, you still have to think that is mechanical, but it's also, even in the mechanics, someone is role-playing, and you need to let them narrate the role-play to make the mechanics better. Because the mechanics should be... I'm not saying... Some DMs, and I'm okay with this, and sometimes I even do it, when they are floored by a person's narration of what they're doing, they're just like, you just get it. I don't care. That was brilliant. And that can happen very lightly in a campaign, and I think it's fine. But, like, in general, I'm much more of a fan of, it's like, whatever you've done, you've now made this definitively better or worse for your party because you chose to do this in roleplay. So now that's how and that's the only way and D&D doesn't explain that to you very well. It doesn't tell you how to do that. You just have to run it enough to sort of get there on your own as a GM and be like, oh, this would be cool, because people like narrating doing cool stuff.
I gotta shout out Camille for roleplay, by the way.
Camille's the GOAT. She's the GOAT of roleplay.
She's so good.
She's the absolute. I will hurt myself. Yeah.
In the last session, yeah, she committed hard to some good roleplay moments, where, for one, she you know, we all know that you're like, oh yeah, you hear the voice of Chevy, but obviously I'm not saying anything.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, like, it'd be very easy for someone to metagame cautiousness, but she knew that she didn't remember the password, and she owned it, and she went into that room and paid the consequences. And then on top of that, she, like, the behavior of her character after that immediately reflects
what happened,
gravity that her actions got someone killed.
Yeah, Camille's a great example of someone who's used other things to enhance their roleplay, because Camille LARPs, and LARPing is very much having to like be the character and own up to, like, LARPing is enhanced immeasurably by people who like actually embody the character that they're playing in a very real way. And I think that the moment, and I'm not saying all LARPers will naturally have this ability, but you can, if you know that community, and you know tabletop communities that are very mechanically driven, and especially people that come from like video games into TTRPG, it can be a struggle at first to just get used to the idea of, it's like, I know so much that I can metagame with, but I need to be this character all the time in the game. In the game, I need to be this, and then you can sometimes resolve them. But
we talk about metagaming as like a bad form, like bad thing to do.
Yeah,
like just not good etiquette. But I don't ever hear people really say this. Metagaming actually hurts your enjoyment of the game.
It does. It genuinely does. It hurts your enjoyment. It hurts the tables, but your own enjoyment, because even though games, like so many of the bigger popular games, are about building very powerful superhero-like characters that over time get more and more powerful and can handle more and more incredibly challenging things, the satisfaction of the game is overcoming those challenges. That's the satisfaction. It's being clever. It's having a lucky, if you're doing a dice rolling game, it's having a lucky streak of rolls and just being like, man, I'm just pulling off everything today. It's having it, and knowing that isn't necessarily definite. You are just getting it. It's making choices and challenging, and then imbuing those things and giving yourself those character moments. That's where the real fun lies. I'm never going to knock a group that's about the grind and the loot. I'm never going to knock a Diablo party. I'm not going to knock them, but they're missing a key aspect to why TTRPGs not only have been popular, but exploded in popularity, which is the ability to play pretend and exist and start thinking as another person that isn't you. And that's fun, and it always has. It's fun when you're a child, it's fun when you're an adult. And a creator, whose name I do not remember, on TikTok, who is a I think they're based out of Atlanta, and they're like a working actor in the theaters there, where like they play on the bigger stages and everything like that, but they also had for years a full-time job. And one of the things they were frustrated with as an acting artist, as a theater artist, was that musicians, visual artists, stuff like that, they all have these really like light versions, or really accessible versions for them to perform or execute their craft, and not have and not have to like do a whole lot of work just to present it to people, just to make it available for people to have those connections, versus not have to hit that barrier, versus, you know, like if you're, you know, trying to put on a play, that's a whole lot of mess just to coordinate and get together so that you can put it on for a weekend. And they're like, they're clearly someone who's in their 40s or 50s, and they're like, playing tabletop for the first time and watching all these actual plays gave me, as a person that is theater trained, that is acting trained, an opportunity to play my craft for a small audience of my friends, or in the cases of actual plays, for strangers on the internet, right? And do it in a way that is performative, that doesn't require me to like do 3 months of planning to do the thing I learned how to do as an artist. Right. And it's like losing that part of it is why it tends to push more people away than it brings in. And in embracing that part of it and getting into the spirit, even if you're just doing it for jokes, is very satisfying in a way that you can't get from a video game as easily, or at all in most cases. You can't get from like a war game, a miniatures war game, because it's just not part of the system. It's not part of the expectation of play. So don't metagame. The only metagame I'm a fan of is not true metagaming, which is the acknowledgement that your characters would reasonably have experiences that you don't talk about at the table or in the session with each other. And so that's why after your party's been together for like a couple weeks, they're going to know what the sorcerer can do. They're going to know what the healer can do. They're going to be able to call out, hey, you got this person, and then do the most effective action for them. Because that's how units of people overcome. That's how teams work. That's how everyone works. So they're going to know their skill sets and everything. So when players are talking about, it's like, hey, I'm going to go heal that, and another player goes, actually, I have something. I have a mass healing word or a mass cure wounds I'm going to flip on my turn. Don't do that, because you know my character's got you, and everything like that. It's like, oh, okay, then that's reasonable. But that, in my mind, that isn't so much metagaming as acknowledging that we as human beings are not nearly as into life as the characters, and that they would absolutely know each other like a well-oiled volleyball team in an anime. Where they just know where their strengths are. They know what their the other players on the team are going to do, and so they post in their spot to be most effective as their part of the machine, so the other people can be effective.
That doesn't even, to me, fit in with metagaming. That's just that's just more like you said, taking advantage of the reality that there are going to be moments between your characters that you don't necessarily expressly get to role play out.
It's not on camera, but it's there. We all know they go to the bathroom.
Moments that are. What was that?
We all know they go to the bathroom.
Yeah, right. Actually, Chevy has never taken a shit.
No, not one time. He just Harry Potters it out of his rectum.
He just teleports it somewhere.
Harry Potter style. Second part of this conversation is the quiz Brandon part of this conversation. Now, this quiz isn't about your general knowledge of role-playing games or anything like that, because you probably know more than me, and so I'm not going to be able to like answer check you. I'll be like, yeah, that sounds right, and everything.
And I feel like all of these things are. I see some of the questions you have listed here are like, and I'm like, well, there's no right answer or wrong answer.
So these are about Brandon Hamilton Wilson's preference quiz. This is like a personality quiz. This is like a BuzzFeed quiz, and I'm going to tell you which Friends character you are at the end. Terrible. They're all awful.
As long as I'm not Ross, I'm okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bottom, right?
If you make me Ross, I'm like, I guess you think I'm a really bad human being.
So let's do this. So the number one question I have for you, and we're going to start it off.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you 3 ranges. Okay. 1 shots, which means 1 to 4 sessions. They are there to solve a problem, and it might take 4 sessions, but it's basically one challenge beats kind of thing, right? Where it's like you're gonna have sub challenges, but you have one problem to solve. So one shots, short campaigns. This is campaigns that are designed around the idea that you are going to be playing anywhere between 10 and 25 sessions. Now, that can actually be quite long in the scheme of things. That could be a year and a half, but it has a beginning, middle, and end. The campaign is decided. You know that you're moving fast toward that goal. Sprawling arc campaigns. These are the multi-year campaigns. Brandon Templeton Wilson, what is your preferred campaign length?
Short.
Short?
Actually.
Yeah, that 10 to 25?
Campaigns.
That 10 to 25?
No,
Probably. Or the 1 to 4.
Like the one shot.
You like the one shot.
I would actually probably say like 1 to 10.
1 to 10. So a 1 to a 2. Yeah, like a long one shot, a novella, if you will.
Exactly. I think that's where the best gameplay exists. At least for the kind of style that I prefer to play. And once again, these are all opinions. These are not. I'm not saying that these are definitive.
Yeah, this is just your preferences.
This is my preference. And the reason why I like shorter play is when you communicate to your players that you're playing a shorter game, I find that they're because of they're not concerned about playing such a long haul game, they're not so concerned about power gaming. They're not so concerned about making sure their role play is perfect. There's a lot less weight on the player's shoulders. There's less weight on my shoulders because I know I don't have to like come up with a freaking epic.
Yeah, you don't need a world. You need a town or a dungeon or like a tower.
Exactly. And by having a narrowed focus, you can actually create lots of detail in those spaces. You can be focused on being like getting really atmospheric. And I think this is something a lot of DMs struggle with is getting like really good at being descriptive of your environments in a way that invokes like themes.
Yeah, in a way that evokes themes and vibes. Yep.
Like in a game that I recently ran, I was talking about them coming upon a town in the midst of a festival. And I'm like, as you approach the town, you hear the noise of large crowds talking over each other. Then you can hear the swelling of cheerful music and people dancing and laughter. Then the smells of the different food stalls. You can smell fresh cooked bratwurst and baked bread and delicious pastries and beer in the air. And you get that moment where you're just like, I'm just taking a moment to just like talk about a festival.
Yeah.
And you could have just like, you walk into a town during the festival.
Yeah.
Or you can
there's games over there, and there's some clowns, and there you go. What do you do?
Yeah. And I think so I think actually in a weird way when you're in that shorter campaign, because you're not like rushing all over the place and you're not trying to be a globetrotter, you actually get to take more time with those smaller things. Because if you're like, my goal isn't to get them from point A to point B to point C to point D. It's just to be like, well, we can just exist in point A over here because we're only going to get to point B and maybe to point C.
Yeah, there might be a point C, but then you're starting to get closer to that like 15 to 25 sesh where when you get to that point C where it's like this is going to take a while. You also you can live in the scenes a little bit more. You can live in the intros a bit more. You can live in immediate content, and you can also take advantage of the fact that you don't need to explain like how traveling across the world takes weeks, months. Like you don't need to do that's some hard level DM stuff, and you can avoid it entirely.
Also, you can make more lethal games.
Yep.
You can have greater stakes, and by having a game that's shorter, players are not as concerned about the fact that my character died at session 3 or 4. Well, I'll roll up a new character for the other 4 remaining sessions. You know,
Yep.
it's not like your character has like gotten cut short of being used for an entire
Act.
act of the game,
which could be several
you've
months.
Already gotten a good portion of the way there. And you haven't been playing that character for months to the points where you're so attached to it that you're now like, no.
And this tracks.
I'm generally upset.
This tracks with you as a movie fan, as a cinema fan. You like a nice, well, like told, tight story that like has a beginning, middle, and end. You don't want to read the entire Wheel of Time series, all 14 books of it.
Okay. I read through book 10, and I don't know how the hell I made it that far.
Okay, next question. And you've already kind of alluded to this. Before I get to the next question, I did have a point I want to say. A funny thing about the description you talked about, like really being able to give like the vibe and the feel of the place you're in and theming and overall, I would argue that regardless of money, regardless of the status of being paid for it or not, that is what separates like a professional GM from like even just a good GM, is if they can do a 2-year-long campaign and they can keep that energy up and make each area feel like that. And then the truly great pro DMs are the ones that can take all of that and lock that whole thing under an umbrella where it all made sense to it didn't feel like you were playing in different worlds or even different like levels of a video game. It all made sense with itself as a theme, and the themes were unique within them, but they moved toward all of it moved toward the greater theme. That's where those masterful DMs are, and there's very few of those, and there's an argument to be said. A lot of people go, oh, like your Matt Mercer's? No, Matt Mercer has a vibe that he's very good at, and that's the thing he delivers. He's very good at describing and doing exactly what you said, of making it a place that feels real and has a lot in it, and it can describe like what's going on in any alleyway or street, but he's not going to then be able to be a master of doing a horror campaign for 2 years. That's not where his skill set lies. He lives in sword and board, high fantasy storytelling, and he's good at that and can maintain that for years. And there's a benefit for Critical Role having long campaigns anyway, but because it's a series, it's a television show, but like
I think the point that I'm trying to get to is that when you keep your campaigns short and you keep them focused, you have less locations you have to consider.
Yeah.
So that as a DM, as prep, you can actually prepare those nice evocative descriptions.
Yeah, and if your location is a city, it's very easy to make capitalism the villain, and that's wonderful.
But capitalism's always the villain.
Yeah, but sometimes
even if it's the rural countryside or the Underdark,
it's capitalism.
It's secretly always capitalism.
But like, it's real easy to stay on theme with capitalism being the villain if there's like merchants and aristocracy and there's the rich district of town, right?
Yes.
And everything. Or like if you're in caves, if you're doing like a 5-session dungeon dive, well, keeping the horror theme is a lot easier than it's like, and you get out of the dungeon and you're in a beautiful sprawling farmland, plains with wheat. And it's like, how do you, like, there's horror that lives in those spaces, but it's not that any DM couldn't do that, it's that you're just making it harder on yourself. And so it puts more energy into it.
I would actually definitely encourage anyone who is even like, obviously all new DMs should start off small.
Yeah.
But even then, I would encourage even longtime DMs, people who've been DMing for years, to take a step back and revisit doing short campaigns. I think if you've been doing nothing but long campaigns for a long time, like for example, Steve, I would actually really love to see the next one we do after
Through the
Mill wraps up, is to see you do a shorter campaign.
Well, when I run a campaign again on Through the Mill, on that, when I run a campaign on the Mill, you better believe that I'm going, because number one, I'm not going to be running
system that's necessarily built for that kind of journey. Because I'm interested in all these other systems. And that helps too. That's what another benefit of stepping out of these games that are very much based to be, I mean, you know, let's call it what it is. Very much meant to be Lord of the Rings, and instead going to systems where it's like, what's this system about? You run a B&B. All right, well, I'm not going to play that for 4 years. Maybe you do. If that's what you want to do, of course, that's fine. But, like, for most people, it's like, oh, there's literally nothing in the system about mechanical character progression. It's about this, and this, and then we're done, right? I did want to note, just because I know you would be excited, I might get you listening back to it in current form. Did you hear, this is kind of related to what we're talking about, but did you hear what the next Taz campaign is going to be?
Blades in the Dark.
Run by Justin McElroy. Very excited for that. Because Blades in the Dark is a great game. It's a great system.
I've always wanted to play Blades in the Dark.
And the idea of Justin McElroy being the nemesis in a heist kind of like criminal organization campaign is good. And the fact that, again, Blades in the Dark, you could run a pretty long campaign with it, but it would be almost you'd really be pulling in other things to get it there, to have a sense of progression, rather than just running anywhere between 5 and 15 session Blades in the Dark campaign. And then maybe after running a couple other campaigns, you return to those characters again and run a different thing for it. Maybe you just basically run Gentlemen Bastards, which is a book series that everybody should read, because it's the greatest fantasy book series. It's shocking that it hasn't been adapted. They want to adapt all of these sprawling fantasies, and it's like, this is literally about a thieves guild that heists. All of these books, it's several books, but none of them need to be read in sequence. You don't need to read the second book after the first book. The first book is a story. The second book, it's good to read the first book first because you have some carryover of characters, but then that is also a story, and then the third book is a story.
Episodic,
it's more like a series of films where the characters return, not a television series.
Ocean's 11 or something.
Yeah, like an Ocean's 11 kind of thing. And it's fantasy. It's kind of low mid fantasy, but like it's fantasy, but it's heist. It's thieving. That's the thing, and you don't get that a lot in fantasy books. So it's good, and I highly recommend. But anyway, another question for you. This is a big one.
Okay.
If you had to pick one vibe, not a mixture. This is hard. If you had to pick one vibe, would you pick rules as written, or rule of cool? And that applies across the board. Like, it's not rule of cool sometimes, it's rule of cool often, almost all the time. So the rules as written happen, and if they go fine, they go fine, but every time somebody's like, I'd like to try and do this, the DM's like always like, yes, you can do that. Or, because it's dope, or rules as written, and they never give you that. They never give you the rule of cool. They either do it too much, arguably, or they do it never, which is too little, arguably. Okay. Which one would you prefer?
I'm going to go, and I guess this is probably going to be controversial because of everyone loves rule of cool.
Everybody does.
I'm going to go with the rules as written. And my take on that is that rules as written still allows for moments of cool.
I agree.
Rules, if you make rule of cool the permanent rule, everything becomes over the top, and then moments, there's no dynamism, there's no dynamics between heightened moments. Everything just becomes constantly escalated.
Now, Brandon, what do you think I would pick, knowing my DM style?
I think you're kind of a rule of cool guy.
So, as a DM, I tend to do a lot of rule of cool stuff because a lot of players really like that. As a player, I absolutely am 100% happy in a world. I'm in the same boat as you. I love being like, if I fail, I fail. That's it. If I'm not, if bad things happen, they happen. I don't need to ever step out of this. Like, I'll play with it, I'll do my asks and stuff like that as a player, because of course I'm going to, but like, at the end of the day, I will never be upset at a DM being like, and you have to do it at the beginning of the set, right? This is the beginning of campaign discussion of how the vibe of the campaign is. But it's like, if someone's like, we are playing rules as written, if it's not in the rule book, I'm doing that. That being said, it's not like I want to play a game that's like a survival horror, but if I'm playing like a pretty typical, you know, like
a survival horror RPG could be a lot of fun.
It could be, but like what I'm generally saying is that at most games I'm gonna be like, oh, I can't do that. That's fine, and it's because I like either trying to manipulate and B, rules as written to force the issue. Like, the rule says this and I'm right, and I can do this because I'm clever and I put the rules together in a clever way to do it. Or the other thing that I love is I love failing. I love I'm one of the few players that it's like, man, if I have a session where I'm rolling dog shit the whole time, I could not be happy.
I will say this. One of the things you may have noticed about me as a player at your table is I am god awful at puzzles.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at them. And so when puzzles come up, I am more than happy to let the other people who want to test the systems
I've noticed it.
Figure it out.
You're like, you got this, team. I'm here to fix it if it goes wrong. That's what I'll do.
I'm here to heal you and revive you should you die. Or whatever needs to happen. If someone wants to point me somewhere to do something. I remember
back in the dungeon, while you were traveling, when I had a bunch of enemies in little doors, and you were playing Barry. You were playing Barosh, and Barosh just opened a door and there was like a bone centaur or something like that.
A bone minotaur.
Bone minotaur. And Barry's just like, I hate being in this place. I hate this. Everything is bad here. The light is green. We need to leave. And everything, there's nothing good can come from this. And then you're just fully playing the party support in a different way where you're just like, open the door. You know your character's the barbarian. He's very strong. He's hard to kill. He just goes in, screws up the bone minotaur, absolutely wrecks the shit.
I literally killed him in one round of combat.
And you were just like, you see what happened? We should just leave. This isn't why we're here. We're just in this dungeon because you want to. And I loved that vibe because it was a great like, I'm not here to puzzle solve, but I will solve your problem in a very barbarian way if you're forcing me to, but I don't want to engage with it. It was a great, like, as a player, you're not you don't feel very confident with puzzles, and so he's like, well, then I won't be involved in the puzzles. I'll be involved with the fuck the puzzle portion of the game, which happens in every campaign, in every dungeon. Fuck the puzzle, power through, because we don't make dungeons like Tomb of Annihilation because it's bad dungeons.
I think you're thinking of Tomb of Horrors.
Tomb of Horrors
is the mean one that Gax created to fuck with people.
I wonder if Tomb of Annihilation is just a rebrand of it, because it's a very similar vibe.
It's not. Tomb of Annihilation is the one where you have to go through the jungle to get to it, and that's actually supposed to be a really good dungeon. The Tomb of Horrors is the one that's in the Yawning Tales from the Yawning Portal.
Oh yeah, and that's the one where
and that's the one
things just kill you left and right.
Dungeon. It's a joke dungeon that's meant to kill characters.
Yeah. People just die. But yeah, so not Tomb of Horrors, but like I love it, and I think it's a good party makeup to have the party member, and you still played it to perfection. I will always love just this character who genuinely does not have to be is in like slightly less relatively threat than other people because he's very durable, but also doesn't see why they're down there. It's not benefiting them. It wasn't the goal of what you were doing. It was just a thing that I put in front of the players to do stuff, and then I put an undeniable hook for one of the characters, and I'm like, well, they're gonna go down there, and then that means the rest of the party's gonna go, because if one character goes, the party's gonna go, and everything, and everyone else is like, oh, cool, talking skeletons, oh, cool, this, and Barry's just like, I hate this. We are wasting our time. I am being injured to survive this dungeon. I'm being injured. It'll be fine, but I don't like being injured. No one likes getting cut across the chest. That's not fun.
Right? Oh. Barry was so great. He's probably one of the best characters I've ever made.
But truly now, yeah. But like weirdly enough, yeah. As a DM, I'm very rule of cool. I'm very like, tell me what you want to do with the spell, roll an Arcana about it, and then we'll see if that works, right? And I'm very that because a lot of people like doing that. But like in my opinion, I'm just as happy to be like, let me try and push your boundaries. But if you come back to me as like, I'm not gonna let you do that in this game, I'm like, great, fine. I'm gonna try.
Are both limitations, but they're also like gears and or like leverage that you as a player can then grab onto to take control of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you and so when you start thinking of the rules as not boundaries, but as the tools that you can use to impact your world, you change your relationship with the rules. You realize that rules are a good thing, and that's why I'm actually more inclined towards crunchier games.
Yeah, it's the same for me. Is that it's like I like to play a crunchier game if I've had time to like learn it, and it's why I like being caster adjacent classes, and it's why I constantly celebrate Emily Axford from NADPOD in Dimension 20, is because she has all the energy of someone that would be like a rule of cool, can I do this even though it doesn't work that way, but then at the end of the day she's actually like mechanically this and this stack. Now she'll still, like every good player, and I do always encourage players to do this, ask, can I do it this way? Because that's never a bad question unless you're trying to do some absolutely absurd, like there's levels and we all have to be adults about it, but a lot of times when that question's asked, it's asked earnestly and it's asked reasonably. As long as you can take the no, always feel free to ask, because sometimes someone else at the table or the DM will be like, well, I suppose if this does this and this does this, I can technically see how the rule that like there's nothing in the game that says that a dog can't play basketball, right? Like you can let that happen if there's nothing containing it, or you cannot, as long as you can deny it. But she is a master of, it's like, can I use this and this and this thing that you've given me, and I'm using them as their items or as they're written, and I fucked you with it. There's no more satisfying thing than screwing over a DM with just what's on your character sheet and being like, I'm just mechanically good and I knew how to do this and I absolutely wrecked yours. And the more convoluted and clever it is, the better you feel as a player, where you're like, I'm in bounds. This is the system.
It's just like playing a good round of chess, and I suck at chess, by the way. I'm terrible at chess. I'll never play you in chess because I'm terrible at it. But yeah. It is like when you play a moment of chess and you have like a really good move. Chess has very simple rules, but it's like there's a lot going on there. And similarly, when you find out how to use the rules to your benefit in the tabletop game, you can really leverage that for some great moments.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a few other questions for me.
I do. I have more questions for you. All right.
Let's go.
Brandon DeSavius Wilson. How do I know your secret middle name, DeSavius? Brandon, if you, because I don't even remember the questions I wrote down in the description, if you had to choose one character class or character type to play for the rest of your days, you could not play any other kind of character. You had to play this, and I'm just talking about mechanics. I'm not talking about like attitude, right? Their personality, that's always yours to play with. But mechanically, if you had to play,
can I swap around subclasses?
Yes. Yeah, you could swap around subclasses.
Okay, I got it already.
What is it?
It's Bard.
Bard, baby. It's Bard all day, baby.
It's Bard.
Bard's a flex class.
Because Bards are probably arguably one of the most, customizable classes.
And they're
You still get 9th level spell casting.
Yep.
With magical secrets, you can literally pick any spell in the game. And then your subclasses give you a lot of different options to go from being able to do being a skill monkey to being, better, more focused on spell casting to, hey, do you actually want to get down on the ground and get in the thick of things with some good
You can do it.
melee combat?
They can do.
Bards,
you can build a bard in a lot of different directions.
Bards can kind of go anywhere.
Yeah, and they're adding a little bit with that that new Unearthed Arcana. They're adding a little bit to the bard too with that. I love how simple, I love how arbitrary it is. That they're like, oh yeah, and a bardic inspiration can heal them for that die instead of.
I also love that bardic inspiration is now a reaction that they take.
I think it's so good.
In response to someone failing, rather than trying to figure out who to throw it to in advance, and then you throw it to that person, and then they roll nothing but 15s to 20s for the rest of the night,
and you forget about it.
Inspiration never gets used.
No, as a reaction, it's so much better. And then I love it too because it's like I don't know, do bards really need a healing? Well, they don't need it, but the greatness of it is that mechanically, this is so benign as it scales. Yeah. It's so clearly, man, this is super clutch earlier levels and then becomes nothing later levels, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that because bards subclasses usually give you other things to do with their bardics at later levels.
The bardic dice inspiration dice scale a bit more.
What do? They go D6, D8, D10, and then they cap, right? At D10, I think.
I don't think it goes above a D10.
Yeah, and D10 is like at the tail end of the level journey too.
I think you get that at level 18.
Yeah, and everything. I think that they could. I think with this, especially, and having it as a reaction, so it burns some of your action economy to use it too.
You're going to be using it more.
You're going to be using it more, so I think at this point they could do it where it's like, okay, D6, D8, D10, and then at least D12. Like add that D12 into it, and then maybe the 18 to 20 level would be like D12 plus your proficiency bonus or something, because you're already way overpowered at that point. So stack it, pile it on, right? Because I've always said it's like once you're at level, honestly in the teens, but especially once you're at level 18, 19, 20. Pile on the overpowered stuff. Just pile it on. Your players should be fighting a whole planet at that point. If they're level 18, it's like, what are you fighting? I'm fighting this continent giant.
That kind of wraps me back to why I think we need to introduce something like my idea for exploits.
Yeah.
For martial classes is to give them some stuff that they can do at level 16 and above.
Yeah,
that is straight up Greek hero level shit of physical feats.
Very, very Herculean, very
you
Achilles.
Can lift up a gargantuan monster and throw them. Kind of shit. You can
suplex a train, a la Chrono Trigger. Suplex that train.
You can leap 120 feet and stomp on the ground, creating an explosion that radiates outward from you.
X amount of times, yeah. Have fun with them, because again, pile it, especially those later levels. Pile it on. Let people do amazing things, because no one's out here with the level 16 being like, I'm not a demigod. That's the point.
A number 9 wizard goes out and casts Earthquake, decimating an entire city, and a fighter still gets just 4 attacks.
4 attacks. And so they've got to have something. And especially things, I'm a big fan of the idea of it's are these things that I could theoretically use in combat and out of combat? Because that's another benefit that spells do that a lot of DMs will because you can still do it within rules of written or as rule of cool. That spells, it's you do earth. You're we're gonna start this. We're gonna surprise this bandit camp by the wizard doing this first to just down all of their tents and temporary structures, which then benefits us in the combat somehow.
Well, I mean, right off the bat, if we want to talk about things that you could do outside of combat, I would give one of these exploits be an intimidation thing that lets them add their strength modifier.
Why not?
To their
It's wild to me that there are DMs that don't let martial characters just use their strength for intimidation. Like, that is such an obvious house rule that I don't think I've ever had anyone deny me that, or ever denied anyone that. The only way I would deny someone that is if it was a situation where it's like, well, you're level 4 and this is a very much more powerful person than you, and they are bigger than you and scarier than you. You're not going to intimidate the aboleth. The aboleth is not scared of you. The aboleth cannot be intimidated by you. You can roll for it, and you might give them the chuckle, and I'll give you advantage on your attack while they're chuckling. That's as close as you're gonna get, kind of thing. But like, yeah, there's all these kinds of things that you can't. That martial characters. It's funny because the ranger has this, but you have to DM to it. But like straight up martial characters just don't. You really have to have a DM that's like, all right, so I have a monk, which means that they can fucking move. I need to give them non-combat move things. And they've got to do a train job, and they've got to keep up with the train, and only the monk is fast enough to keep up with the train. And so the monk's gonna monk it up to the engine and try and pull the brakes to slow down the train so the rest of the party can catch up. Like, that's the off the top of my head, but that's a very particular scenario that does not apply a lot of the time.
All I see is a monk saying, I have a very particular
set of skills. And it's like I've seen it again. I've seen great DMs do it, but they've done it in shorter campaigns where they're like sitting there and they're like, I don't have to care about how this character is going to be in 10 levels. They're only gonna, even in a Pathfinder, even in a Starfinder D&D kind of campaign, they're only going to level up like once during this thing, so I can know and kind of build to what their talents are a little bit in this, and then generally have those tools and give everybody their spotlight moment as a talent thing, versus the idea of running for so long that eventually everyone's going to get there, which you're not guaranteed to do unless you have pretty good role players that like take their space. Another question for you, Brandon. This one's big. Discounting the racist ones. Discounting like gross, like bad form, like races in books that are attached to a bunch of bad stereotypes. Is there a situation? Are you for or against extreme limitations of party makeup, cosmology in a race? Are you for or against extreme limitations on that? So like a good example of this would be you can only play humans, dwarves, or elves, or you can play anything under the sun. And again, I'm discounting the ones that, whether or not an individual DM would or would not ban this, I will give a pass to anyone regardless of my opinions personally on banning Drow or Hadozi or something that has a lot of problems behind it, and they either don't know their table enough to play those in a way, or they're not confident and they just want to avoid the problem.
I generally actually do limit my player's options at my table.
Yeah. I played at that limit and it's fine. It was fine. It's a fine thing to do.
I'm not quite sure I entirely get what the question's asking though.
So the question is, are you, if you had to choose, you could only, again, same thing, rule of cool versus rules as written, really extremely limited, where maybe you only have between 3 and 5, and that's it. That's all that anyone could pick. Or you had the majority of them, not including the ones that are banned because the person's uncomfortable because they don't love the vibe that they come out of in that space.
So I'm going to go with less options. And
less options.
Why.
You're a less options person.
I'm a less options guy when it comes to character options, and the reason why is I actually find that like when you start giving your characters into like monster races and stuff like that, like playing Yuan-Ti and things, all sorts of different options out there, by having you know, and this is a hard one to answer like in the right with the right language. But what I'm trying to get at is that like if like nothing is off the books for your characters as far as choice goes,
Yeah.
what ends up happening is that the world becomes so homogenized with magical creatures everywhere that there is nothing to surprise them.
Mm-hmm.
If every different type of magical creature exists everywhere, then nothing is interesting or unique.
I agree. Here is obviously Through the Mill is a big hodgepodge, but I agree. I think the solid way to do this and the way I would have done this now as opposed to when I started the campaign is that I would have let everyone pick whatever they want. You know, kind of thing in the session 0 and the pre-campaign thing, and then I would have built my world, and those would have been it. That would have been the vast majority of it. So that world, like that even means that like if no one's a human, there just aren't humans. That's fine. They don't have to be humans and everything. And so if I had done that now, I would have been like, all right, so there's basically dog people, cat people, kind of shorter kind of humanoid races, so like gnomes and dwarves and halflings, and then tiefling and as a rare group, and then that's it. And then that's the whole spectrum, maybe half orc. Yeah, and so I would have probably been like, instead of them being a half orc.
Doing, by the way, is they're just ditching half orc entirely, and they're just making orcs.
Yeah, that's what I would have done. I would have just been like, this is just what it's a half orc, but it's what this group of people look like. This is what they all look like. Yeah. They're on a spectrum, so there's variety, but they're all this group, and that's that group. And I think I would have done that more and been like that, because it's very tempting in the worlds with lots of different heritages to kind of enjoy playing around with all of those and everything, and grabbing little bits and pieces of the lore and modifying them. But I think it's the simplest thing, because then it becomes a situation where then it's an immediate thing where your player characters, you didn't limit them at the front, but then, you know, and of course a module and other things, this doesn't work out, but if you're doing like your own stuff, right, you didn't limit them at the front, and they got to inform what the world was made of, not you, in a way. And it doesn't, and it also takes the stress off your back and gives you back exactly what you said, Brandon. Then, you know, halfway through the campaign, I can be like, you go to this island and there's all these people with round ears and tan, like varying shades of flesh, and they don't have tails or wings or anything.
Their skin is green.
They're all like, they're not small, but they're not big. They're kind of forgetful, and that's your island of humans and everything like that. And that can be fun. That can be a fun thing to bring into the campaign.
I think from a player perspective, players have a desire for their character to be unique, and part of the way that they can do that is by choosing an interesting, obscure race.
Yep.
And I think I actually kind of fight back against that because of because one, it gets old to actually try and run a game where you're in a world where everyone is surprised to see the character because they've never seen a person like that. That gets old real quick.
Yep.
And it gets hard to role play, right? It's also getting into territory that's
could be mishandled. Yep, could be mishandled.
Yes, easily mishandled. And so I fight against that because of the players are typically supposed to be the people that we can relate to, and then the world is supposed to be filled with magic and mystery.
I agree.
And oddities.
I also think that there's a misunderstanding from a player perspective on playing a unique character, doing an obscure race to play them and everything like that. And it's like in a magical world that can happen anyway. So like that, there's that, but it's not your character's physical aesthetic that makes them unique. It's what they do. It's who they are. That's what makes them unique. Their physical aesthetic should just be a thing. And so that's why I like that, because it sort of like meets them in the middle. It's like, all right, you want to play a tabaxi, that's fine. I love a good cat person. That means tabaxi are around. And they're just one of the main 5, 4, 6 populations, and that's what people see. And yeah, if I had built Through the Mill now, that's what I would have done. But if I'd done it now, I would have done It Was a Quiet Year to build the entire world first, or the entire continent first, because I love the idea of, it's just like, let's all just sit down and do a couple sessions where we kind of figure out what this is. And then it becomes my job, because it gives me my favorite part, which is, you've given me guidelines, and now I get to be clever within those, rather than I just tell whatever story I can think of. Because I have unlimited options. I much prefer it's being like, all right, so it's this, and it's this, and it's this. And so now that I know all of that, and yeah, so if I ever do another long campaign again, it's not going to be in a widely populated world. It's going to be in a world where it's like there's the populations of the people that the players chose to play. And if everybody plays humans, elves, and dwarves, then that's what it is. It's very Lord of the Rings. If everybody plays...
talk to people about limitations on your games, as... because, like, I feel like there's a trend right now in D&D space to try and make D&D capable of doing everything a tabletop RPG should be able to, like, can do.
Yeah.
Like, there's this desire to make it all things for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I caution people against that, because of by having your game have that narrower focus, you can have that you can have like a more... What happens when you try and add everything to something? It gets messy.
Yeah, it gets good.
It gets messy. It gets chaotic. It gets it. You don't want a Lord of the Rings is actually a pretty tight, focused narrative.
Yeah.
What's another good, excellent narrative? Mad Max Fury Road, tight, focused narrative. Few characters, few locations.
Yeah, and so having everything... You don't want
to be playing a game and then have literally anything from any other setting at any other time pop up.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why...
throw off your theme.
That's why, and again, this was from just, like, watching and playing a lot more and everything like that. That's why I was like, oh, no one picked a Warforged, and I haven't mentioned Warforged. Okay, there's this community of Warforged. I renamed them, but they were Warforged, and it's like they're not everywhere, and they have a story about why they existed, and they don't exist anymore, and everything, and that was in the old world. Final Fantasy did. The old world was more technologically advanced.
Now there's a group of Warforged who are reproducing.
Yeah, and what's great about that is like, oh, you affected that and you added to the world. Are we going to play the outcome of that? No, that's just something you did, and in the denouement, in the epilogue, we'll talk about what that choice did, but like I'm not and yeah, realizing how genre specific. It was very funny because I am a very rule of cool person. I was like, yeah, let's turn your airship into a drill ship because I want you to have ship travel. I don't really care about what it is and everything like that. I just want you to do like long ship stuff and everything. And so there was this opportunity to do it.
Fun with it, by the way.
But like in reality, at the end of the day, it's like there were airships in the world. I let that be a thing, right? That's how one of the characters got to the continent, is an airship. But for what, like a year and a half, 2 years almost, did you get to go on one? No. You had to travel. Did you travel by train or by wagon or by walking? Yeah, but I was very deliberate of it's like there's not like I'm in other areas of that world could probably have that technology, but there wasn't like, here we are in Water's Wealth, let's go to the teleportation circle to go to Furhat. Like that, no, that's just not. I don't care if
Wealth is is a backwater.
Yeah, I don't care if it would have made sense because there are powerful wizards and wizards have teleportation circles, and it literally mechanically says that you can permanently create one if you do it every time for a year, and that would in every society be the logical choice. I decided narratively it was more interesting to do that, and so you should really look at those kinds of things when you're building your campaign and see what is interesting to play is the most important thing. Followed by, on top of that, or in conjunction with that, if there's something you come up that's super interesting to play, go, pocket that. If it doesn't fit in the vibe of the world that you've created, do it new world and tie it all back into what you said, Brandon. A shorter campaign lets you do more things and stay more on theme. And then if it's not exactly what one of the players wants at the table, but they know it's only going to go for like 10 sessions, then they know that later they're going to get to play their hacker in something else that has hacking in it that makes sense for it, and you're not going to play D&D.
Roll up your pirate for that pirate adventure.
Yeah, roll up a pirate.
Roll up your Van Helsing for your horror themed adventure.
Yeah, roll up your Monster Hunter for your monster hunting adventure. Roll up your erudite roll up your erudite, like diplomat for your Waterdeep campaign, right? Like roll it up and just do that, and go super old school with how a lot of DMs used to create their worlds, which is every campaign that you have is just in a different region of this one world that you've created. Because I still stand, it's like we've gone 2+ years, we're still in one continent that's roughly the size of Australia, and we're not going to get anywhere else. I'm not if you'd really pushed it and we're all going to abandon this Latet bullshit, we're going to go north and we're going to leave the continent, then I would have done that and you would have just never seen the other half of the continent. But I was like, I'm not going to invent 7 continents for you to travel to. I'm going to invent one large area, because this was a plan to be a long form campaign, and you're going to travel that one large area, and then that's enough. I don't need, it's mostly desert and high arid plain, and then if I want something else, I'll just take you into like some divine plane and do some fucking Fae bullshit or something like that. Like, I don't need to I don't need you to go, it's like, and now you've reached the forests. Like, no, it's just not forests. You're just not going to spend a lot of time in a lot of forests in this campaign. It's fine. And so, yeah, but it goes back to that whole, like, I would still have done Through the Mill this way, because if you told me, Steve, you're going to still be able to be running this campaign several years later, I'd be like, well, I have to take the chance, because that never happens.
Oh, dude, I'm so freaking happy to be I'm so grateful to be a part of that game.
Because it's but
I've had a blast.
The many future campaigns, even on NADPOD when they did their campaign 2, and I think the whole campaign was 40 episodes. 40 sessions as opposed to 100. Yeah. And in that 40 sessions, there was a side campaign that's part of that campaign. So it's part of the 40, where there were 4 to 6, I want to say, sessions that were with different characters and everything. And so with a different player, because somebody had a baby and they needed to take some time off, and so they did this whole thing. So in reality, that the actual characters that we followed that were at the beginning of the campaign, 35 sessions, a third of the length of the campaign 1, and it was great. It was fun. It was wonderful.
I have to ask a question. I'm gonna flip a question back on you.
Okay.
Now that you've been running Through the Mill for over 2 years.
Yep.
What do you think is your biggest lesson you've learned whilst playing this one?
Lesson that I've learned. So many. Lesson that I've learned. For a long form campaign like this, I would have focused more at the beginning about making it a bit about the journey between, rather than the points that you're supposed to reach. Just to balance that out a little bit more. I think that would have been a big one, but I think the biggest lesson I would have done, and this is wild for you because you've already done this yourself, because you did it, but I think the biggest lesson I would have done is I think I would have spent the first several months of sessions. I think the moment your party left Water's Wealth, I would have cut to a different location and had you play different characters for a while. Then cut back to your Water's Wealth party and done some fun like backfill scenes, and then do sessions from party, then cut back to a different thing. And I think I would have had the same players play 2 different sets of characters doing that. And I think I would have done that to keep people's energy up and to give me a lot of fun things that I could have had in my background of being like, this is how party version A and party version B are affecting each other's shit.
Like that, you would like probably create little more like narrow focused arcs with like definitive beginnings and ends.
It would have been,
and then after one ends, you jump back over to the other characters.
Yep, it would have been like that. It would have been kind of Game of Thronesy, but like in bigger chunks, more like there's a series of books written by Robert Hobb that are all under the umbrella of the Realm of the Outerlings, and there's the first trilogy of books, and it's a tight story, and it could have ended there. And then the writer, she wanted to write something else, but she stayed in her same world, so she just moved to an area that was kind of casually mentioned, and none of the characters from the first trilogy are in the second quadrilogy. It's pirate themed, it's sailing, it's very different vibes. It's told in a different perspective when she writes it. The first trilogy is in first person, the second quadrilogy of 4 books, third person, right? It's a completely different way to write it, but it matters in the world because of the things that happen there, so that when we return to the characters from the first trilogy, time has passed, things have happened, and some of the events that happened in the interim of the quadrilogy eventually come up in the second trilogy with the original set of characters. And then after that trilogy, they leave again and go to another quadrilogy with different characters, and then they go back to the original trilogy characters to wrap up their stories with another time. And I'm like, that to me, if I had thought of that at the time right when you left Water's Wealth, I would have absolutely been like, we're going to jump to there and we're going to do that. And what's funny is I still would have been able to integrate that other thing I said. It's like, I could have, instead of setting you up in a town, I would have set you out in the middle of nowhere, and then had you do some journeying and some stuff that didn't happen in the town as these different characters, and then come back. And I think that's what I would have done. I think that would have made it a little bit more fresh for the party, fresh for me, and done some real cool things story-wise. Now, you did it in the way that you're like, I'm kind of feeling like pivoting off this character for a bit, so I want a new character, and everything.
Pivoting off this character for the next half of the campaign.
For a year plus, and everything. And you did it and created this kind of really cool situation for yourself. But like, rather than have that be the player's responsibility, I'd love it if it was baked in the narrative. And it's easily something you could mention, like, hey, we may do a thing where we play these characters for a while, then go to other characters that you all make, and then come back to these characters later.
I really like that idea a lot,
because it lets you.
I like it because it helps you break up the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you can have more defined arcs that you can kind of, what you're doing is you're kind of getting the best of both worlds by doing this, and that you're getting your smaller or to medium-sized arcs in, and then jumping ship, so to speak, to another arc that you've already been planning in the background for the other group of characters. And then you get to let the other characters go in the background and have their downtime, and then we get to revisit them as a new problem arrives
in wherever they're at after you resolve it. And so it's almost upsetting to me how like straightforward that is of a plan for a long campaign. And I've even played in a game where that fucking happened, and I didn't think to do it because it didn't happen on purpose. I played in a game where we were up in an area. It was like a fantasy Europe, and we were up in an area, and up in an area, and there were these like there's this kind of necromancer that was taking over Europe, and working with the church, the Catholic Church, because of course they were, and everything, and they had this big like large army that they were moving into Germany.
And they had this big, like, Stargate portal size thing that they were marching the army in. And in a panicked moment, one of the players decided that they were going to run through the portal. And they succeeded at their checks. And they were teleported literally like 1,000 miles away from us. And there was no way back. And so then the DM is like, all right, roll up new characters. We're going to play in that section with that original party member and a bunch of you playing new party members there. And then we're going to have them roll up a new character to play with your current existing party where they're at. And then the game eventually fizzled out before those things got to meet each other. But like, I was like, but like that wasn't the plan. That was an absolutely unplanned situation. And I can't believe I didn't think about it. And so the next long campaign I run, that's absolutely what I'm doing.
The thing I also really like about that is that even if a campaign ultimately fizzles, because most campaigns do, and that's the reality of playing tabletop RPGs, is that by doing things in that method, you give yourself an opportunity to have beginnings and endings.
For pieces, you never got to get to the end, but you got to get to ends.
Got to have, yes, exactly. You got to have ends.
It would be like, and I hate saying this, because this isn't how it would narrate, because it wouldn't span over this time and be generational, but it would be like the Star Wars trilogies, where it's like there was the original Star Wars trilogy, that was a beginning, middle, and end. And then there was, in theory, the prequels, which were beginning and middle and end for that, knowing that there were the story continued but had already been told. And then there was the sequels, which is in theory a beginning, middle, and end. I'm not talking about whether the prequels or sequels actually executed on that, but like that was obviously the intent, right? Beginning, middle, and end, 3 generations, 3 eras, 3 things. And it's like, if the prequels had never come out, that wouldn't have affected the beginning, middle, and end of the original trilogy. If the sequels had never come out, that wouldn't have affected either the prequels or the original trilogy. And so, like I think that's an amazing way to play. And then having it be a situation where, whether in minor ways or if the campaign does go for a long time, in significant ways, the actions of Party A affect the actions of Party B. I hear a lot of DMs about running their world and having different tables, playing different parties in different sections of their world and doing this, but I don't...
That's West Marches.
Yeah, that's West Marches, a whole thing, but I don't think I've ever been at a table that's like really from the jump been like, this is the plan. We're going to do this. You're going to get to play 2 different characters, bare minimum, through this, and the longer we play, the more we'll go back and forth, but they're all going to have their challenges and be caught up in things, and it gives you such a great excuse to do the thing like, okay, we're back here, we get to return to these characters, they got to level 5 last time, all right, they're at level 5 now, and everything like that. You're happy to have them back. It's been a year. What's your character been up to? What do you think they've been doing during this year of time, and then having them come back together or still be together or whatever the party narrates? It gives it so much more influence. I'm so mad that I hadn't thought of that earlier, but like now we're like level 14, 15. So it's like, no, we're driving home to the end on this one.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end here.
Yeah, we're in the final act. We're about to hit the climax battle, battle of it, and it'll be 3 years, and I don't regret it. But next time, if I do a long form campaign, even if I'm thinking in terms of it's as long as it goes kind of thing, where I'm breaking it up in sections, but I'm like, this will just go for a while. That's how I'm gonna do it, and then that way players can do that. And you could, in theory, if you wanted to, have like a core group of play. Maybe you got like 2-3 people that want to constantly play, and a couple other people that are like, I don't know if I can. It's a great way to be able to slot in and out people who could only commit to like 6 months, and then they gotta go and everything like that. And it's like, all right,
like me with no life, who's like 3 years.
3 years. I got you. The 3 games. Let's do it. We're gonna do it. Yeah, I think that's it. But the key here is that I think what we've rooted to, I think the main theme of this is really think about when you're doing a campaign and you want to have that big TTRPG experience.
and you're gonna play it in a system that allows you to run a long gauntlet of character journey, really think if that's how a story is built, and it's how the story you want to tell is built, or if it's more interesting to tell several chapters of a story, building up to something long term that don't make you feel as bad that you never got to the cool thing at the end, because you built it to have lots of cool things on the way. And like, that's true of every D&D campaign, but like doing it in a 3-act structure in shorter form and then having subsequent 3-act structures is good. That's good. You can do that. And then you're putting less pressure on yourself to always do it, and you're giving yourself a lot more license to be like, I didn't like how that worked out for those 10 sessions. Next time we play, even though if it's the same characters, if it's different characters in that same world, this is what's going to happen to justify me changing it up a little bit. Next time we play, this is what I'm going to do to fix the problems I created. But
it also, by doing that, you also, like, as a DM, compel yourself to wrap up plots faster.
Yep, you do. You absolutely do.
And it can help you avoid getting pulled into those, those issues where I think a lot of what happens is DMs want to keep the story going, and so they keep trying to prepare more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, trying to drag on something for a long time will cause it to fizzle.
Don't be afraid to also give up on things if you're in a long campaign and be like, yeah, I'm just not going to. Like, our campaign right now is very much around around the poker deck pantheon and dealing with that problem, however you deal with it. With violence, most likely, but for some of them or all of them, who knows? But
it could be a whole bunch of deicide, right?
Yeah, it could be a whole bunch of deicide, and like, I had other things, and some of those things you even touched on, and I just sort of hack force those things back into the main plot because I'm like, I don't want to spend 3 to 4 more months on that. We're on this train now. This is the train we're on. I'm not gonna reroute. Like, well, we've been on this train. We're on the train. They're at this level. If you didn't masterfully, scale out and be able to plan everything so that every beat hits and every loose end gets tied up in play, that's going to be fine if the play session to session is fun. You can always be like, in the denouement, in the epilogue, which you all will get, in the epilogue of what does it look like this many months later and everything, you can have a couple sessions where your characters really get to define what happened, and you can go to all the little loose threads you did and come up with little, like, moments of narration where your player gets to be like, how do you wrap up that loose thread, player, that matters to you.
To talk about, I would. By the way, I've been recently re-listening to the balance arc of Taz.
Yeah.
And I've just got to the Stolen Century.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about one of my favorite retroactive changes in that entire campaign, and that is the reveal of Barry Blue Jeans.
Yeah.
Spoilers alert. Spoiler alerts for anyone who hasn't listened to Taz. If you haven't listened to Taz, Balance Arc, do yourself a favor and stop listening to what I'm about to say. Okay. So that moment when the red robe that they've been seeing steps into the chamber that is growing a body, and out steps Barry Blue Jeans, one of the first NPCs they ever get introduced to in the game, that people very quickly fell in love with, but then tragically died. That is one of, like, you're right, that's a chef's kiss moment.
It's a chef's kiss moment. It's one of the best moments.
And let's be real, there's no way in hell that Griffin had that planned when he first introduced Barry Blue Jeans.
No,
no way.
It's simply not. Barry Blue Jeans as a name was a joke. The NPC is in the NPC is in the adventure, the Fandelier. adventure that they played, like that NPC exists as an identity in the adventure under a different name, and that is literally just Griffin being like, what did I have, how do I what's happened, how can I decide that comes back in a fun way, because we know that it mattered to the players. My comparison to that is because I just reheard the episode. NADPOD Season 1, spoilers. Early on in NADPOD, they do a deck of many things. And they meet a gnome that, like, deals them the deck of many things. And one of them pulls the fighter card. So they get a little fighter guy who becomes the DMPC of NADPOD. And then I want to say roughly 50-ish episodes in, 55 episodes in, they meet an important NPC that they'd been hearing about, and they're in the Feywild, and there's this whole thing, because this fighter has been with them now for dozens of episodes. It's a whole ass NPC character that follows them around. It matters. He's jokes at first, and then they begin rooting for him. He's always kind of the underdog character, Balnor.
Balnor.
The underdog character. He's hilarious.
He's the dad or something.
Yeah, he's the halfling's dad. He's Bev's dad, essentially. Adopted father. And he's always weaker than the rest of the party. Murph does a great job of being like, this is a utility. This is basically a horse human being that can talk for jokes. But, like, over time, if your players have an NPC that's with them a long time, they're going to bond with them, right? And they do. And then, like fucking 30-plus episodes later, it gets revealed, like, how that matters and really ties both the NPC that was important to the lore and this fighter card random happenstance thing all together in a meaningful way that mattered to the plot. And it's heartbreaking, and it's really good. It's a really good thing. And there is he expressed that he did not have that at the beginning, but that he had when the character came out or early on, but that eventually he figured out that this was, like, he started noodling with the idea that this is a cool way. Once he realized this fighter was sticking around, Balnor was going to be a character, right? Once he started that, he's like, okay, how do I do this? How do I bring this in? And then had the fucking patience and ability to resist to not drop that until it really like push the story forward, push the connection forward between that character and the other NPC that was there, made things make sense. And it feels like a planned written moment. It feels like he looked at the random things that happened, and he was like, what if I planned this? And you can do that as a DM, because you can just say that you can just, and you can be honest too and be like, I didn't plan in the beginning, but, like, I did it. And it's like, that's talent.
It's like in Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, when they're like, Vanessa was a fembot. Yes, we knew all along, sadly.
Okay. Yeah, but, like, so definitely do that. But we have been talking about tabletop for over 2 hours, so it is time to wrap this up. Thank you very much for anyone that happens to be watching this. Thank you, Brandon, for joining me on this. We will have another one of these in another couple weeks to talk about some other systems and some other organizations, and some other, like, tips, tricks, and interesting things we love about tabletop. But for Brandon, my name is Steve. This has been Questboard Gaming. Thank you for joining us, and good luck on your rolls. Good luck on your rolls. Roll with advantage in life. I don't know how to sign this off. Something.
All your dice be nat 20s.
The real adventure is the friends we made along the way. Okay. All your dice be nat 20s. Never. Boring game.